Cardiff City, by contrast, who will kick off the League One segment for the first time since we've done the pod, Cardiff City are a third-tier team. And they look every inch the third-tier team off the field at the moment, George. My strong stance on Cardiff is that they are one of the worst-run clubs in the EFL. I think that's the reason they got relegated from the Championship, rather than apportioning the blame to managers or individual players or things of that nature. I think that football and the way that clubs are run has really moved on from the way that Cardiff try and do it. And I get really frustrated on behalf of the fan base, because I think what's happened in the last few weeks, I think, has been quite embarrassing, to be honest. And the potted history, if you like, is reports that Cardiff have hired external help, an agency to help with their managerial hire. Loads of clubs do that. It makes a lot of sense, I think, to have outside perspective. People with it could be really good data insights that they can provide. It could be people with really good contacts. There's any number of reasons why you might ask for some external help, especially when you're a little light on the ground in terms of football operations, as Cardiff seem to be. And all the reporting was that they had a shortlist drawn up. A lot of the names on it made a lot of sense, and there's some quite good candidates available, which isn't always the case. And then it seemed like they threw it all out the window to make a play at Nathan Jones, who I never ever bought that he would leave Charlton, having just won promotion and really got his teeth into the club, or got his claws into the club, working under conditions where he's clearly comfortable and thriving. This is a guy who knows what it's like to be comfortable and thriving, and certainly knows what it's like to be unhappy and being heavily criticised and kind of swimming against the tide. Absolutely no guarantee that Jones would have just gone into Cardiff, turned them around and taken them up within a season or even 2 seasons, just because he's done it before. I think it would have been absolutely insane from a career point of view for him to leave Charlton for Cardiff in their current guise. And there was also nothing in the reporting that suggested he actually wanted to leave. It was kind of the perfect crime of managerial reporting, where the report was Cardiff have decided they want Nathan Jones. Even in the piece it said Jones isn't angling for a move, but everyone picked that up as Nathan Jones is about to become the Cardiff manager. That wasn't the case. Back to square one. Maybe it'll be Aaron Ramsey, who obviously took caretaker charge and might be looking to finish his playing career by getting a job at his hometown club. Reports last night, Sunday night, no, it's not going to be Aaron Ramsey. Actually, he's going to Mexico to continue his playing career.
He's going to Mexico to play. But what's funny about that is all the rumours were like, Ramsey's done with playing. He knows he can't do it anymore. No, he's moving to Mexico to carry on his playing career. Like, it just shows it's just so much crap that is like spouted to create content that it just isn't true.
Well, yeah, I suppose. The reporting was, maybe it was crap or maybe it wasn't, that he had said to the club, I will only be the head coach of this club if you give me an actual support structure, which currently doesn't feel like he exists, which I can believe.
I can believe that, for sure. It's more the idea that he was like set to retire when actually he was negotiating a playing contract on the other side of the world.
Yeah. No, I feel you. And the upshot is they're now back to Des Buckingham being the favourite for the job. Brian Barry Murphy, second favourite. Ian Evatt, third favourite. I think it's really embarrassing. I think for whoever gets the job, George, there's always going to be that aspect of like, well, it seemed pretty clear that you fancied someone else more than me. And the way that they go about things, not only the incoherent decision making, as I perceive it on the sporting side, but also the fact that everything plays out in the media, so everyone seems to know what's going on at all times. Understanding that maybe not all of it is entirely accurate. It just paints such an ugly picture, I think, at the club, and it makes me worry for them.
Yeah, and also, and again, it's a media circus around this, where 8 days ago we had local journalists being like, Cardiff will be making an appointment imminently, and then they don't, and the person they're being linked to publicly signs a new contract, obviously with the club in the league above, and yeah, it's a bit of a mess. I mean, I think if they appoint Brian Barry Murphy, I'd be very excited to see how that goes. I wouldn't necessarily be like overly confident it would work, but I'd be very excited to see whether or not it does, because I think if Brian Barry Murphy takes what he did from Rochdale and takes what he's learned from City and brings obvious connections that will come with having strong connections with the City Academy can only be a very good thing for a League One club. He could be very, very good with a big budget and technically better players than the level. With Des, I'd be really intrigued to see how that goes as well, because there were moments at Oxford where it felt like tactically he was very, very good. But again, I think he'd have learnt a lot from the year or so that he spent at the club, and he's already delivered a promotion. Either of those two, and even Everett. I know there's a lot of noise around Ian Everett, but it's another case where a lot of very, very good work seems to have been forgotten off the back of some bad stuff at the end. But he feels to me like the one who wouldn't be swallowed by the job, if that makes sense. Like the job, I worry a little bit about BBM and Des. It's a massive job with huge expectation and a lot of scrutiny, and I worry a little bit with how both of those would deal with that. Whereas with Everett, it may be fighting fire with fire, which doesn't work. But similarly, I don't think he would feel in any way intimidated by the job at hand.
You'd have been excellent in the prehistoric era with such a good knowledge of how to fight fire.
Water,
not with more fire.
Crucially,
yeah. Water.
So who's wet to put the fire out?
Brilliant. Let's move on. Miron Muslic moved on from Argyle. He left for Schalke in the Zweite Bundesliga, having played a bit of a blinder, I think. Sort of alluded to it a bit in the Liam Manning Bristol City to Norwich City segment. There's part of me, because I'm not emotionally invested, that wants to go to bat for managers who try and take better opportunities and don't worry too much about having led people on or said certain things and going back on their words. This is really tough for Argyle fans to take. Muslic sort of played a bit of a blinder, using his popularity and an objectively great job that he did since his appointment, with some great moments and some decent league form as well, even if it didn't end in a miracle survival. Said some really strong stuff that kind of, I think, had the result of kind of boosting his own profile and then making it clear that he had done a good job and that he might be available because things were a bit up in the air. Then it felt like he'd started maybe to commit to Argyle in League One. They've obviously had big turnover off the pitch as well, with Dewsnip having left in January, the director of football, followed by this summer Jimmy Dickinson, the head of recruitment, and Ross Goodwin as well, who was head of football data. All have had a big impact at the club over the last few years, and they've been turned over. Now David Fox is the new head of football operations, Tom Randall, the new head of recruitment, who had worked with Muslic at Cercle Bruges, and now Muslic is gone and left for Schalke. So Argyle going through another managerial hire. They've had quite a lot of these over the last 18 months or so since Shuey left for Stoke. The current favourite, Brian Barry Murphy, Des Buckingham second favourite, and Tom Cleverley third favourite. George, how do you look at this one compared to what we just talked about with Cardiff? They're both coming down from the Championship, and at the moment there's a lot of uncertainty and a vacancy.
Very different in terms of Argyle have just gone through a complete restructuring of their footballing hierarchy, so it feels like a good job for someone to come into, a head coach to come into, I guess, and operate in that way. And it's a club where, despite some of the noise around the current owner, he still, to my mind, is one of the best owners out there in terms of the way that they operate. Yes, some bad decisions were made, but that doesn't change a long period of success that came before that, even if relegation was frustrating. So, I think Muslic, probably learnings for all football fans there, not to buy into a manager's own PR too much. It feels like he effectively played Argyle and did so very effectively to further his own career, which, given the lack of loyalty that is often shown from fans towards managers, I guess you can't be too upset when the reverse happens. Albeit he seems to have given assurances to Simon Hallett that he was going to remain at the club and seemed to be involved in decision making when it came to transfers when he was destined to leave anyway. But you can't begrudge him a move to Schalke. Like, it's a massive club, and he did a very good job over a period of time there. I think it's still a very stable club, unlike Cardiff. I think the two jobs are very, very different, even though the names are kind of similar. And if I was a manager, I'd be much more interested in taking the Argyle job in terms of the job you'd be walking into. And they're already making some pretty impressive moves in the transfer market too. So interested to see who they take on. With Stuart Webber involved in the decision making, I would be a little bit disappointed if it was, say, David Wagner or Jack Wilshere, people who are appointed at Norwich. Although maybe Wilshere came in after Webber left, because he might have been involved with Ben Napper at Arsenal. But either way, let's see. But even though when you look at Webber's decision making at Norwich, even down to the last Wagner appointment and at Huddersfield, his managerial appointments were mainly very, very successful. So there's, it looks like Argyle should be in good hands in that respect.
Yeah, so Huddersfield have made their appointment, and it's Lee Grant, who is the former goalkeeper, yes, and also someone that's worked very closely with Kieran McKenna at Ipswich over the last few years. Grant's someone who, I think for a lot of fans, obviously this comes out the blue, not a name that they might have heard for a couple of years, and maybe the fact that he was a keeper as well, just, unlike a sort of former centre-back who captained every club or centre midfielder, those are the types that often, translate very obviously through from playing to the dugout. Grant's taken a different approach, but by all accounts has been impeccable in his kind of coaching journey, if that makes sense, and his transition into management. Someone who has been unbelievably popular with all the players that he's worked with since he's been a coach, who I think really impressed Huddersfield's fans with the clarity with which he spoke and the confidence with which he spoke, with a lot of Huddersfield fans understandably a little taken aback by the appointment of a rookie manager when their expectations are so high for next season and challenging for automatic promotion at this level after a disappointing campaign last season. I mean, it continues an insane string of permanent managers that Huddersfield have had since Corporate left them, from Mark Fotheringham to Neil Warnock to Darren Moore to Andre Breitenreiter to Michael Duff and now to Lee Grant. But I have to admit, without knowing if Grant will be good or not, and without necessarily having that much confidence in Huddersfield as a football operation at the moment, outside of the head coach situation, I'm still really excited that he's got a job because, for maybe 18 months or so, George, he's been mentioned to us in passing as a very impressive future manager. And now we get to see him in his first job.
Yeah, I'm also excited to see it. Huddersfield fans, some of them at least, not particularly happy with the appointment, thinking that experience was necessary. I think the signings of certainly Marcus Harness, Ryan Ledson have appeased the fans somewhat as they look to be recruiting real quality for the level. But it should be said that Grant, first of all, he's a goalkeeper, but I think therefore there might be a perception
he's not still a goalkeeper.
Mate, once a goalkeeper, always a goalkeeper. All right,
he's not going to be playing in nets.
Ask any goalkeeper that. What I was going to say is there seems to be a perception that he might have been a goalkeeping coach, whereas that quite clearly isn't the case. I think he was a big part of Kieran McKenna's coaching staff and seemed to be, in particular, an attacking coach. Where I've seen a lot of stuff spoken about, I think, in terms of Connor Chaplin in particular, and how crucial Grant was in the kind of relative turnaround of Chaplin's career from being a League One player to being a Premier League player a couple of years later. He seems to be very, very erudite and bright, and incredibly popular. And the fact that Marcus Harness wanted to play for him, having worked with him obviously at Ipswich, should be testament to that. So yeah, I'm really excited to see how they go. Last season was a total and utter shambles. And I still believe the owners there, despite having made some bad decisions, seem to have their heart very much in the right place in terms of what they're trying to achieve, which is sporting success rather than anything else. And I think you learn quite a lot in failure, and they seem to be making some good decisions this summer.
And I think last week, if we move away from managerial news and go into transfer news, where it's still very early on and some deals have been done, we spoke about some last week. We're covering every single transfer on ntt20.com for our subscribers. But last week, the main transfer news in League One was the emergence of Blackpool as a big payer, one of the strong payers at the level. By which I mean, I was looking at the League One promotion battle as, Luton coming down with Premier League parachute payments, with Argyle and Cardiff if they get their hires right, Bolton under Schumacher, due to improve, and Huddersfield as discussed, and Stockport third last season, and Wickham and Orient, the other playoff teams who should be competitive at the very least. And I hadn't really thought about Blackpool under Steve Bruce, but they very forcibly kind of entered the chat here by signing first Fraser Horsfall, Stockport centre-back, on a 4-year deal, and then Michael Ahikwe, the Sheffield Wednesday centre-back, also on a free transfer, on a 3-year deal. And it's the length of the contract that stands out, and I dare say the length of the contract and the security that it gives a player, plus the very competitive weekly wage that's been reported or rumoured for both, that has got them signing for Blackpool. And it makes the eyes water a little bit when you see the length of contracts for players of this kind of age. More so with Ihikwe, given that he's already in his 30s and over the last 3 seasons hasn't actually started more than, I think, 22 league games for Wednesday in the last 3 years. When he has played, he's been excellent. For 3 years before that, he was excellent with Rotherham. There's absolutely no doubt that he's a strong defender for this level. And the same can be said for Horsfall. So I would be excited, mainly as a Blackpool fan, about the idea that Blackpool are actually flexing their muscles financially and able to do so. I also think on a really basic footballing level, it's quite fun to me that they scored the second most goals in League One last season, Blackpool, which kind of surprised me. But they conceded, I think, they only had the 13th best defensive record. So there's something quite simple and nice about George just signing 2 really good centre-backs for the level in order to try and become a better defence and hopefully not change too much going forward, and then mix all that together and you probably do have a top 6 contender at the very least. But even so, it's welcome to the promotion discussion, Blackpool.
Yeah, I think Horsfall in particular is a really big sign of intent, where you've got a Stockport team who was so impressive this season. He's been a massive part of their success. They are ambitious for League One level. They are sure to be involved in the mix-up again. They are everything about them is good, effectively. Their owner is a good owner who has a lot of money, so they're in no need of money. It feels like Stockport are a great place to be, and that's reflecting the players that they attract. And so this is kind of at odds, where suddenly you're like, oh, it kind of seems strange that Horsfall wouldn't want to stay there. And that, it's a bit of a kind of green light, I would say, in terms of Blackpool next season. That obviously it means they are spending money. Like, there's no way that Fraser Horsfall has moved to Blackpool. I'm afraid to say, any Blackpool fans listening, it won't be the size of the club or anything else. Like, it'll be because they've offered him a financial package alongside an ambition for success that he's bought into. And that suggests we're going to see a bit of a shift from Blackpool next season. And I didn't love the Bruce appointment at the time, but they were solid enough last season. They ended the season relatively well. So I like the Horsfall signing a lot. I think Ihikwe is, when fit, obviously better than the level. I can see them being, Steve Bruce is very good at building teams that don't concede too many chances. And I think in Horsfall and Ihikwe, he'll have 2 defensive players who will enable him to build a solid foundation from which to build a good team.
Defensive Titans in Tangerine, Ihikwe and Fraser Horsfall.